Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Rachel Jeffcoat. I'm the communications lead for Nature Towns and Cities, which is a new partnership programme. We've been operating for just over 12 months now, and we publicly launched earlier this year in the summer. So it's a really good opportunity and really timely for us today to be able to talk to you all about what we've been working on, give you a few insights into how communications is shaping up for us as a new programme, bringing new partners together, and all the opportunities and challenges that brings from a communications perspective. Just a very quick overview of what we'll be covering today. So I'm going to start us off with a quick introduction to the Nature Towns and Cities programme, what we're all about. Handing to Adele Rowe from Natural England, who'll give us some insight into how we're approaching communicating as a partnership. Catherine Worswick will then talk to us from National Lottery Heritage Fund. We'll talk about how we developed a new brand, thinking about what that would need to look like for an evolving, growing mission with lots of layers and complexity. And then Laura Marsh, our senior content producer, will take us through some examples of what communications for the programme looks like in practice. And then I'll round things off with a look at where we've got to so far and what's happening next. There's quite a lot for us to cover in 45 minutes. We will do our best to respond to questions as they come in, and leave some time for Q&A at the end as well. But we will share how you can get in touch if you want to find out more after the session. And just a reminder to please use the Q&A function for questions, and we'll come back to those at the end. So to start us off, what is Nature Towns and Cities? We're a new mission, founded as a partnership, and with partnership running through everything we do as a core principle. And we're committed to bring nature home to the towns and cities across the UK. And that's because 2/3 of us don't have access to quality green space close to home. That's what this programme is looking to change over the next decade. This isn't about piecemeal interventions in single parks or one-off green spaces, single projects in individual communities. It's about changing systems to put nature and everything it can do for us right at the heart of how we plan for our future, joining up action across whole urban landscapes. So the three partners you'll hear from today who founded this mission have committed through this programme to help build capacity and expertise in towns and cities to make sure that change is locally led, that change is ambitious, and that it's long-lasting. So we're doing that by bringing together organisations who between them have the influence, the land, the trust and the resources to make that happen. So that means local government, it means large national public sector bodies and charities, grassroots organisations like voluntary and community sector organisations, and it also means the private sector. There's a number of different approaches we're taking to this, and they're all coming together under this single umbrella of Nature Towns and Cities. Grant funding to help places build capacity locally, skills development through events, training, peer networking, and an accreditation scheme which is designed specifically to help places attract investment. We're growing and evolving these approaches all the time, responding to external changes, to new opportunities brought through new partnerships, and feedback from places participating on what they need. So when nature lives nearer, we all live better. That's our strapline at the top there. I think summarises quite neatly what we're aiming to do here. And we're probably preaching to the choir a little bit here. As an audience, I'm sure you're probably very familiar with all of the benefits that nature can bring, as well as its inherent value. But what we're doing here is bringing all of those things together and basing our long-term outcomes on nature underpinning every part of a thriving 21st century city. From health and well-being of residents to better travel and connectivity for people and for nature, new green economies with new jobs and green skills development, and communities coming together to be able to take ownership of positive change in their neighbourhoods. And just a few of the outcomes we're aiming for over the next decade on the next slide. This is large scale and can't really say that enough. This is big and ambitious. So we're talking UK-wide. We're looking to support 100 towns and cities in all four nations of the UK to transform urban life through nature. In those towns and cities, this is about reaching everybody. So it's whole populations, making sure nature can be part of everyone's lives. So 5 million more people who don't currently have access to nature a short walk from home, gaining that access over the next decade. 1 million more children, particularly those who will benefit the most, being able to play outdoors in nature every day. We're looking at systems change, but we're also looking at enabling grassroots action within that system. So supporting 1,000 communities to take action in their neighbourhoods for nature and climate. And of course, this all needs significant investment. There's no one funder or organisation who can solve this on their own. But what we're doing is helping places to become investment ready and helping to make the case to those potential investors, and looking over the next decade to mobilise £1 billion from a multitude of sources, public, private, philanthropic, into transforming places through nature. That's just in a nutshell what we're doing as nature towns and cities, and I'm now going to hand over to Adele to talk through the power of partnership. So Adele, over to you.
Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everybody. So I'm Adele Rowe. I'm Director for External Affairs and Board Services at Natural England. And I've been involved in the project since the beginning, really. And it has been an absolute joy. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the power of partnership and why we've taken that approach, as Rachel says, right the way through all of the work streams on the project. So it would have been quite easy for us from the beginning to say, oh, well, one organisation could lead on the comms, but we haven't done that. We've very much done the comms in partnership as well. So I'm just going to sort of journey back as to how we started. You'll see on the screen there some elements, highlights of the current strategies for the three organisations that are the sort of founding organisations of the mission that Rachel outlined. And you'll see there that there are some fairly obvious overlaps. But the very first meeting that we had no agenda. We just had a sort of vague inkling that we had an interest in urban nature in some shape or form, and perhaps enhancing that because of the power that has to change lives for the better. So we had no agenda, and I was so taken with this that I didn't even go to the first meeting, and how wrong I was to miss that. Colleagues came out of that meeting so enthused about the possibilities, about what we could do working together, that I made sure to attend the next meeting. But I wanted to make that point in particular about when you're bringing partners together in that way, sometimes a meeting with no agenda is what you need to sort of throw stuff around, see what sticks, give yourself space to think about what is possible if we sort of suspend disbelief and imagine what might be possible without the regular constraints that we come across so often. If we could go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So yeah, we really wanted to be more than the sum of our parts as we were bringing together the three comms operations. So whilst it has been a joy working on this project, it has been messy as well at the beginning. It did take a while for us to get to know each other. It's three very different comms operations. So we have one grant giver, one membership organisation, and a government regulatory body, all with different demands, different internal stakeholders. There was definitely some nervousness in terms of bringing Natural England's communications into this, in terms of the close relationship that we have with our core department, DEFRA. And actually the nuts and bolts of Natural England's communications are done through a shared service across the DEFRA group. So there was some nervousness about a sort of potential overreach there in terms of things being slotted into government grids and maybe having undue influence around what we were trying to do as a partnership. So we tested that at the beginning and got through that, and managed to reassure everybody about the independence of our communications function, and that actually doing this the right way, getting that ministerial buy-in and departmental buy-in is only going to increase our platform. As we saw at the parliamentary reception launch earlier this year. One of the other things that we worked through as well was the multiple layers of sign-off that we have in our organisations respectively. And then when you bring all of those together, at one point we had sort of triple layer sign-off going on in each of our organisations. So I think it was about 6 months in, wasn't it, Rachel, when we said, right, okay, we need to rethink this. We stripped out some of those sign-off layers and we really started to understand where our strengths were, where the sign-off needed to be, where those crucial decisions needed to take place, and where we could just trust each other to get on with things. And that really stood us in good stead, as I'll speak about a little bit more at the end of my slot. bringing our audiences together has been really powerful as well. So obviously we've got a membership organisation, government and two government bodies coming together, all with expertise in reaching different audiences, and also different parts of organisations that we work with that have helped to build the partnership. So the expertise that lottery bodies have in reaching the communities that we want to reach and being able to translate technical application processes into customer-friendly approaches. The knowledge and campaigning expertise of National Trust colleagues in terms of how we've shaped this as a mission has been invaluable. And then on Natural England's part, the connections that we have into, for example, planning authorities and local government more widely has been really helpful in the sort of pragmatic design of the programme that we're doing together as well. I've said there, the communications expertise shaped the overall project for the better, which I think everybody here at Communicate over the last 3 days, that's really what we want to be able to do, and it definitely did in this project. So there came a real crunch point, sort of about 6 weeks, 2 months or so before the soft launch, where we were still, as communications professionals, saying, what is this? What is this project? It's amazing. It's going to do brilliant things, but there are so many different work strands. We were struggling to be able to say, Nature, Towns and Cities is. And so we pushed back really hard, saying, we will not succeed with this project, this mission, whatever it is, because we can't say what it is. And so we pushed back really strongly at senior levels in our respective organisations and the overarching project board for them to nail down those work streams and really spell out what it is that we're trying to do here, that then made it easy for us to explain and gave us our strapline and the mission that Rachel mentioned right at the beginning. So that strong foundation there, as I said, all of the sort of iterations that we've been through and getting to know each other, that was invaluable in terms of the final stages of the project and that inevitable back and forth on edits and really last minute changes and things to press releases and all that sort of thing. We had a bit of a shorthand to be able to trust each other, to be able to do that really quickly as we needed to. And even some last minute sort of changes to nuance in terms of the emphasis of nature within the whole mission and making sure that that stayed strong throughout the narrative. As we were explaining it, we felt that we had that good foundation that we could rely on. I'm going to pass now to Catherine.
Thank you. So I'm Catherine Worzick. I'm Director of Marketing and Communications at the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and I'm going to talk to you a bit about the branding journey. So firstly, with 3 well-known partners behind the programme, you could really easily make the case that a logo lock-up and then the combined weight of our 3 existing brands would be the obvious approach to take here. And that definitely formed part of some of our early discussions. But we thought there was really a bigger opportunity here to create something new. And we wanted something that was fresh and positive identity that others could get behind. So not just thinking about the 3 founding partners around the table, but also actually all of the other people we'd like to get signed up to this, and providing a consistent, simple way for multiple partners to communicate the programme to multiple audiences. Also, practically, we were aware that this was going to be an initiative with other partners coming on board over the years, and we had these visions of a danger of a complete logo soup with not enough of a clear identity without our brand. So developing the brand, we thought very carefully about the geographical considerations. The Heritage Fund operate UK-wide, as well as a broad political spectrum. So once agreed on developing a separate brand, we did this properly. We conducted research with our stakeholders. We're moving on to the next slide, from our intended target audience through both interviews and focus groups. And we were testing various approaches. And this told us what the new brand should look like and what we should avoid. So we wanted to feel very, very positive through this. So we were avoiding the kind of sometimes doom and gloom that climate and biodiversity messaging can perhaps fall into. It should also feel inclusive. So thinking about different types of people, organisations, types of towns and cities, and different scales of applications within this, that sort of thing. We wanted it to feel credible for the long term. So we had a lot of feedback through this that we see sort of flash in the pan initiatives in this space, which were over very quickly. And we wanted through this to signal an intention that this was something for the long term. It's, as you know, a very crowded space. So we needed to both stand out, but also have the opportunity to draw other organisations in who were already doing great things. And it needed to be relatable. So we needed to ensure people could recognise that this could impact their town and city. A primary audience for us here is a B2B audience, but the feedback we got from this audience is don't be too B2B. They emphasise that they need to sell this to their own audiences, so it's got to appeal to the general public. And the other messages we heard very strongly, that nature often feels like it's over there, it's out of town, it's the rolling hills, the big sweeping images of landscapes that we all love, and we often see, let's be honest, in the ads for our own brands. But it should be relatable to everyone looking out of their window now in a town or city. And that's really how we landed with the support of Johnson Banks on our brand agency on the Urban Butterfly. And this brand's concept was born from the idea of a set of icons bringing nature to life through recognisable urban visuals with a sort of natural twist. And on the right-hand side there, you can see the early set of concepts for what this might look like. And through the rest of the presentation, you'll then see essentially where we ended up. And hopefully you'll see there's a real inherent fun in these. We felt this set this apart was from maybe what was expected from us and what you might see in more traditional approaches. And we felt it really spoke to that sort of relatability, tangibility. And it will be no surprise that with real experts part of this initiative from the land and nature space, we thought really hard about the insects, the animals, the flowers that we've shown. And it really speaks to that need to appeal to both B2C and B2B. So the concept of the urban visual language resonates through all elements of the brand. So the logos, the icons, which I've already touched on the previous slide, they're also the icons we developed to allow us to quickly communicate different concepts. And the colour palette is a bit on the side of too vivid or fluorescent to feel like a traditional nature palette, which we felt differentiates this more from the sort of blues and greens associated with the environmental sector. It moves us into a more urban or modern palette, even to blacks and whites. And the lead font, you'll see, purposely calls to mind the sort of font you might see on road signs, to bring that sort of kind of visual urban feels to things. And to think about the kind of realism and relatability, blending icons and photography, there's a set of rules about how we use this. So, for example, they should always be proportionate to the scene they're placed within and to each other. We want to make sure they're interacting with those images and to show how nature and urban settings can interact. They're not two separate things. Really practically, those icons also help us with a bit of a challenge we had. We're talking about a change program, so we might not always have images to tell a story. So the icons sort of help us bridge that challenge. You'll be pleased to know there was also discussion around tone of voice principles. This is very much about a positive tone of voice, inviting others to come on board, being supportive rather than lecturing. We want to lift people up through this who are already doing great work, help them feel positive and part of that journey, and also to feel collaborative. So we had a lot of discussion about what we write really feeling like a conversation and always giving people ways to respond and ways to be part of. So as Adele touched on, this was a really collaborative process to be part of. It's sort of great to be able to draw on sort of three very different communications teams and the collective expertise. But it's one thing to say about how we'll deliver this in practice, how we'll deliver this sort of in the theory. So have that vision that we worked through, but another really to deliver it in practice. So I'm passing over to Laura, who's going to talk through a bit of the challenge there.
Thanks, Catherine. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Marsh, and I'm the Senior Content Producer for the Nature Towns and Cities programme. So I'm going to share some insights about what all of this thinking and brand work looks like in the context of our growing online library of resources, which is hosted on our Nature Towns and Cities website. And I believe a link to that is about to go into the chat if it hasn't already. So the main focus of my role so far has been shaping the strategy for our resources library, working with colleagues across the partnership and beyond to produce these assets. If we move on to the next slide. So as you've heard, Nature Towns and Cities is all about enabling and empowering places to make a difference for communities and nature that are most in need of nature and green space. And part of how we do this is through our online library of case studies, guidance and tools. So on the screen here, you can see a snapshot of what these look like. We've got some different formats, such as expandable step-by-step modules, card grids, images with kind of quotes overlaid. And in deciding what to produce for all of this, we drew on lots of insights from a cohort of local councils who are supporting the programme, asking what they wanted from this part of our offer. And primarily they told us they were after inspiration and an understanding of what's really possible in the sector in kind of best practice and out there ideas and delivery. And then they also wanted, on the kind of other end of the spectrum, access to learning materials and ways to kind of enhance their own development and share with colleagues as well. As well as these insights, we undertook quite a bit of competitor research and consulted with programme specialists about their need to actually, deliver the programme itself. So all of this came together. At the moment, we're only a year in, but we're currently presenting the resources in 3 distinct different formats that are all made up of the multiple components that I shared on the previous slides, and also include things like imagery and video, web copy and downloadable assets as well. So again, I think into the chat any minute now are going to be some links to an example of each of these formats. But to take you through them, we have a Get Started With format, which is our kind of star product. And you can see in the central blue square there on the screen. These guides are really comprehensive, lots of different components, and they offer an end-to-end solution to urban greening challenges. So the example is that we've shared is a community food growers guide. So if you're a grassroots community organisation or even an individual that wanted to grow food in an urban area where you lived, in theory you could jump onto here and get some great ideas to get started. We also have Meet the Nature Makers, which is on the right-hand side of the screen there. That's interviews of people who are doing really innovative things for urban people and nature to bring out the kind of human experience of that. The one that I've flagged up here is with Edinburgh Council and some really innovative toilets that they've built across their parks and green spaces. Having personally visited those toilets, I can advocate for their excellent form and facilities. And then lastly, we have some general kind of themed guides, which are deep dive on specific subjects. They're often to support a specific need of one of our programme work streams, such as accreditation, or the example I've shared here, and which again will go into the chat, is a quick start guide to urban greening. So you could jump onto here and get an idea of what we even mean by urban greening and the steps to kind of how you might get started or apply that in your own role within a local council or partner based there. So all of these formats are designed to move people along a sort of funnel from very broad inspiration through practical support and then out to recommended reading across our programme themes. So the idea is we kind of go big, and then as people can kind of self-serve through the guides to get what they need, we'll have less but more intense or kind of longer dwell times in our content. And in producing these, I've learned so much about content creation, but specifically content creation in a partnership context. So I've got a couple more slides to share with you that draw out some of the key things I'm hoping to take forward over the next 12 months. So first up, I would say I've learned to really grow with who you know, and that is all links back to the partnership itself, which has a goldmine of experience, materials and contacts that helped us to get resources production off the ground in those very early days to a fairly kind of tight deadline and turnaround. It was so important to lean on this existing partnership network, and it really drove the quantity and quality of our resources to give us a strong start. Internal colleagues in all of the partnership organisations who don't necessarily work directly on the programme but still support our work have also been an essential part of this growing with who you know. I found investing time up front to bring them on the journey and kind of explain what it's all about, get them enthusiastic and enable us to tap into existing processes and systems within those organisations has saved a lot of time as well. In recent months, we've started to invite organisations and groups with less established connections to nature towns and cities to collaborate on our resources too. And we haven't always got it right, but I found that simple acts of kind of being really generous with sharing our assets and cross-promoting their work on our channels and vice versa have helped to smooth the journey there. And having just a level of humility, just because we're bigger doesn't mean we know better, has helped to grow our network of contributors too. And we've really been able to reflect the audiences we want to serve in our content and shape who we want to be as a partnership through these connections and growing that base of who we really know. So my last slide there is my second learning, which is that B2B doesn't have to be boring. We're still refining how best to apply our toolbox of icons, logos, colour palettes and everything that we've got at our disposal. I'm actually wearing a Nature Towns and Cities branded t-shirt there and a lanyard. I'm fully branded. So you can see we're starting to take the brand kind of into real life as well as having all these beautiful digital assets. But my main takeout in this kind of context of not being boring is that actually the most important thing when applying the brand is not to overthink it. So if your hedgehog doesn't fit, then take him out of the picture. And I think the resources that consistently perform the best for us are those with a really clear human story. So how-to guides attributed to a real person or complex processes that are explained firsthand by someone who's actually done it or uses it. It's quite time intensive, drawing out that sort of human side, but it's really worth it in the performance stats. And on that point, I think the last thing I'd say is context is proving absolutely key to the successful application of our brand through the resources at least. So a layered approach with heavier use of the tone of voice that we've talked about today and the icons in the kind of higher level shop window type content that people come into first and see and get really kind of drawn into and a feel for what we're all about, layered on top of a kind of more pared back approach as you dive down that funnel that I mentioned into the more complex kind of how to do this or detailed explanations of things, reflecting a little bit more perhaps the language and the look and feel that people would see in their day-to-day professional experiences. Broadly, I think sometimes less is more, and we're still learning the best way to use that as we go. So I think I'm handing back to Rachel now.
You are. Thank you very much, Laura. Give me a second. Yes, so back to me to round off with a quick overview of what that first 12 months has looked like and what's happening next. So just a few key metrics on the screen for you here. It was really difficult to choose the key figures from what felt like a really busy year. Where we've got a lot done. I think it's fair to say we're really pleased with our first year in terms of kind of those overall engagement numbers and programme delivery. What we've got out the door. But I think it's also fair to say that matching comms outputs to some of those big program outcomes that I was mentioning earlier on is challenging and quite complex. So how do we know that somebody who reads a resource, attends an event, what's the chain of events that then leads to kind of real world change happening on the ground? So we're working on this as a whole program team through our evaluation model using a theory of change to help understand what the journey is through different elements of the program. So this year really has been an opportunity to benchmark, to test and learn, to understand from our perspective, from a communications perspective, what does good look like in terms of engagement numbers, what's the size of our audience, what's the scale that we're kind of working with here. So yeah, that being said, a few of our kind of key metrics. So across the top, some of those key comms engagement metrics from this year. So as Laura's mentioned, our library resources now well over 30 individual pieces. I think that number might have gone up since I put it on this slide actually. And then our events. So we've had roughly 4,000 attendees to online events over the last year. I think events and resources together are often for people, as Laura touched on there, kind of the first point of contact someone has with the programme. So they've been really helpful to us in terms of kind of reaching out into different networks and helping us to grow our audience from a base of 0 this time last year. Finding the networks, those internal and external networks of interest. So people are interested in a particular topic or a theme, and being able to reach people through those channels. But then looking to our sort of our digital channels to find ways to continue the offer to that audience to retain them. So website and online newsletter has been really helpful from that respect as well. So on the bottom, just a few key numbers in terms of our programme delivery. So really pleased to say 5 towns and cities have achieved recognition through our accreditation scheme. So they can now call themselves officially Nature Towns and Nature Cities, and those are Birmingham, very recently announced last week, Plymouth, and then Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole operating as a collective. And yeah, we're working with them now to take that to the next stage. So accreditation is kind of it's a launch pad, not a destination, I guess, where they can then start to look at building a pipeline of investable projects, and we will support them through that journey. Then I've talked a bit at the start about community organisations. So we're really conscious we don't want to assume what community organisations want and need from us. So we've started a in-depth co-design process with a kind of cohort. So we had a in-person conference last month with over 100 community organisations represented, who all, as part of that conference, took part in an initial co-design session. We're going to be working with some of those in much more depth in the coming months as we firm up that community's offer to come out next year. And last but not least, we have work starting as we speak in 40 towns and cities across the UK. So they're all part of 19 total partnerships who were awarded between them £15.5 million in funding in the summer. And these projects are about building capacity in towns and cities all across the UK, and they're just getting started. So really exciting that it's all out there and happening. I'm just going to hand over to them actually for the last word, so you can hear a little bit from those grant places on what they're planning before we have a few moments for questions. There's a video about to pop into the chat box, which I'm assured is the best way for you to all have a decent viewing experience of a video rather than trying to stream it on here. So if you follow the link to the YouTube link that's in the chat box, have a look at that, and we will see you back here in a few minutes, and we'll take some of the questions. So thank you very much, everyone. Yeah, that's right. The video is just a couple of minutes, so we'll just give it another 30 seconds or so, and then we will come to your questions. I can see there's a few questions coming in through the Q&A, but we've got a little while, so do feel free to pop in your questions if there's anything else you'd like to ask. So we'll start on the Q&A there, and I can see a couple of questions. So I'm gonna bring Catherine in first to answer a question on is it an England only project as the other devolved NGOs are not included?
No, it's a UK-wide project. So we've got 3 founding partners who are on the call, but from the start, we've been working really closely with Nature Scot, Natural Resources Wales, and the Northern Ireland Environment Agency. So the intention is very much to be UK-wide, despite the sort of 3 founding partners, not all of them having a UK-wide focus.
Thank you, Catherine. Did you want to come in on a question about the feel of the branding? So the question is, the branding looked almost childlike. Was this intentional? If so, can you explain what the reasoning was?
Sure. So yes, it was intentional, absolutely. So, and that goes back to some of the things that Catherine and Laura talked about in terms of the discussions that we had with the agency we worked with. So we wanted it to be playful, and we didn't want it to be telling people what we thought their places, their communities should look like. So having that sort of playful element to it really helps with that. I can say this on Rachel's behalf as well. One of the funny comments that we had was, don't make it too National Trust, as in, don't make it what we think it should be, make it what our audiences will respond to. So we sort of held that in our minds as well. Thanks.
I think I'll just add to that there's one of the KPIs that I talked to at the start about 1 million children being able to play in nature. And there's one of the icons was specifically designed around being able to communicate that concept of play. So I can't remember if he's featured anywhere, but the robin sort of with a sort of tennis ball pattern on it. So there is definitely an element of being able to communicate those kind of concepts of children and play. I'm just going to keep working my way down. So someone has asked, not sure if this has been mentioned, but what's the current spread of communities involved and what spread are you looking to achieve? I live in a very rural area and wondering if this would be eligible to be part of the project. So yeah, it's a really good question, and I think so. Some of the grant places. So I mentioned 40 towns and cities, but they're spread across 19 partnerships. So some of those partnerships cover sort of a larger geographical area with a number of different towns and villages within them. So the idea of the initiative really is that it's about urban spaces. It's about those places where we need nature the most. It's also about landscape scale. So we're looking for projects that can, and the projects that we'll be working with are about transforming across large kind of geographical areas as well. But absolutely as part of sort of a local collective, a local partnership. Any sort of rural but urban, if that makes sense, areas will be able to be part of it. Next question or comment from Alex Hughes, saying, I work in wetlands and wonder if you're familiar with the Wetland Cities Accreditation Scheme. Don't think it's something that I've heard of. I'm just wondering, okay, I can see Laura shaking her head. I was wondering if it was something that we'd come across in any of our resources. We will take that away, Alex, but we'd be really delighted to hear from you. If Laura, would you mind popping our email address in the chat for people to be able to get in touch after the session?
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Alex. We'll take a look.
Can I just come in on that? I think we have started discussions with Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust, haven't we? So I'm sure that there are links there that we'll be making. Yeah.
Thanks, Adele. So I can see a question around what kind of upkeep will the initiative take and how has funding for this been considered? So I think it's a great question, and it's quite a difficult one to answer because the projects are going to take so many different kind of shapes and forms. But I think there's a real emphasis on capacity building, and that's so the grants that have been given out through National Lottery Heritage Fund, they're all about building capacity, and the reason for that is to make sure that this isn't kind of a one-off capital thing that then depreciates or the maintenance isn't considered, or it's about making sure that up front places have the right people in place, the right resources in place, the right partnerships, that we've thought about the kind of capacity from the outset, and then looking to fund the projects, building on that kind of good base of having the right capacity and partnerships in place. And our accreditation scheme is all about that as well, actually. So the accreditation is all about readiness for investment, to make sure that long-term funding has been considered as part of plans that people are putting in place. Did any of the rest of the panel want to come in on that one? Okay.
No, I mean the only thing I'd say is in terms of any partnership, as anyone who works in comms will know, from a comms perspective, which is obviously the side we're sort of heavily involved in, it is always more resource intensive working in partnership, and as Adele touched on, sort of getting that sort of multiple agreement as well. So thinking about that comms resource, that is one of the challenges, but it's also been one of the sort of greatest joys essentially of working with partnership, is that's quite often what brings you the most sort of fruitful opportunities from a comms perspective.
Brilliant. Thanks, Catherine. Okay, last question I can see here. So what are you doing for the evaluation and for the commitment of the nature towns and cities? I can't see a name for this questioner, but if I don't answer this correctly, just feel free to pop your question in again. Just checking that I've interpreted it right. But in terms of the nature towns and cities, I'm guessing you mean the places that have become accredited. So those, so once you earn your accreditation, there'll be a sort of continual review process. So I think I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's every few years we'll recheck against those kind of accreditation criteria to make sure that in terms of the commitments of those places that it's that they're in for the long term. In terms of evaluation, that all forms part of the theory of change that I mentioned briefly earlier on. So we have a program-wide theory of change, which looks at kind of what's the world that we're trying to build, what are the long-term outcomes that we're looking to achieve, and there are individual place sort of theories of change that nest within that. I was actually in a workshop earlier this week with the 19 grant partnerships, looking at their sort of individual theories of change and how that nests within the wider programme. So that's the approach that we're taking to evaluation. I hope I've interpreted that question right, but do drop us an email if there was something that you were looking for that I haven't picked up there. So we are right on 3:30, so I think that's time for us to close this section and for you to have your 50 minutes break. But thank you very much to everybody for joining us, and yeah, please do get in touch. Slides will be shared along with the recording, I believe at some point next week or in the near future. But thanks everyone for joining, and take care. Enjoy the rest of your conference.